Presentation is the last thing that somebody wants. People want to solve their problems, and how can you help me solve that problem? And yeah.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com.
Hey, Jack, just before we start, I've been doing some thinking lately. You know, our podcast won't be legit until we have a sponsor, right?
Okay, but haven't we been turning down sponsors?
I know, but it's hard to recommend something you and I don't use often, and we're already promoting the crap out of our services.
Fair point, but what about the course we just released? Wouldn't you recommend that to our listeners?
Yeah, for sure I would. All right, so how would we start?
Well, for starters, I wouldn't mention that it took us over a year and 3 trips to Japan and Switzerland to record the thing.
All right, let's not do that. But at minimum, I would want to mention where they can find the course. Like, let's put it to, course.quickmail.io. Would that work for you?
It works, and then I could share what a few of those early students had to say about it. Like the one from Damien, who said it was by far the best course on cold outbound I've ever taken. Or what did Chris say? The week on sales research and targeting prospects blew my mind. Yeah, we definitely want that in there.
Yeah, I like it. It's kind of too easy. You know, people always say nice things when they get results. And at some point, we're going to have to come up with some hard sell copywriting materials of our own. And you know, I'm not that great at that. So I don't know, what would you put on the page?
Okay, how about this? Imagine that instead of getting ignored by prospects day after day, you could just follow a course that shows you how to book meetings with dream clients and automate the entire outbound process so you can focus on closing deals and scaling your company. Plus, there's that money-back guarantee and the 8 modules and the bonus podcast interviews. But so far, so good?
Yeah, I like it, man. But you know, I like your style. So anyway, all right, it's getting a bit late. So can we podcast now and review that later?
Yeah, but at least promise me that course.quickmail.io is finally live and people can finally try out the course right now.
Yeah, sure. I already put it live, and just so you know, I added that special price we discussed about for our podcast listener, and then we can leave it here until, we're happy with the landing page. Sounds fair enough?
Yeah, let's do it. Today,
interview.
Guys, we got an exciting conversation coming up. We are joined by none other than Greg Rosner over at PitchKitchen.com. He runs a sales enablement agency that fixes your bad sales presentations. You know, the one that tells a story about how great you are instead of your customer. Greg shows sales teams how to make the customer the star of their sales presentation and win more deals. Greg, welcome to the show, man.
I'm so psyched to be here. I had to sing your music because I love your music on your podcast.
So cool.
Thanks, man.
Hats off to Jeremy for the music. We don't talk about that, but yeah, Jeremy found it somewhere on the internet, and Greg likes it. I'm happy. Jeremy's happy.
Awesome. On to a great start.
I'd say so. Let me kick things off. Greg, so this is probably a good place to start. Who needs a sales presentation? And just to be clear, are we talking about a slide deck, or is it something else?
Yeah, so who needs it? A lot of businesses, software, SaaS, internet, e-commerce, where the sale happens through pretty much a conversation or relationship versus going to the website and putting your credit card in. So if you can go to a website and put your credit card in and buy for something that's under, say, 10 grand, then it probably doesn't need a presentation. It probably needs a presentation as far as an awesome website. Takes people through a great journey of, what you're selling, why should I care, how is it going to help me, and what do you want me to do? Oh, you want me to buy now. So that's a conversation that takes place between a person and a website. But when I'm talking about sales presentations that B2B companies, sales teams uses, they typically have a product that sells for about 50K plus, maybe 50K to 500K.
Okay.
And to sell that, it typically needs to have some conversation with people, a conversation that helps somebody understand the value. And it's not just sometimes one-to-one. Sometimes you got to meet with a CEO and VPs, and it's a whole group sale, complicated selling process.
So basically, If you're at a high price point, tens of thousands, and you're selling to multiple people in an organization, you got to have a sales presentation.
Pretty much. More fundamentally, you need a story. You need a really good story.
I like that.
And we'll talk about that in this podcast, because without a good story, you're just talking about yourself and how great your stuff is, which nobody cares about.
So, all right, I have to piggyback on that. What's the thinking process when someone who's listening says, all right, yeah, I got my company, we got a service, we got a product. How do I put a story around that?
So great stories start with the problem. So if you think about it, every business is in business because they're solving a problem, right?
Yep.
But it's too often we get sort of enamored with our products, with our secret sauce, that we forget that that's why we're here. And so the best way to craft your story is to start with the problem that you're solving, for who you're solving it, and create what I call conversations. So I believe, from working on literally thousands of sales presentations with companies all over the world, that there are 12 essential conversations that take place between the beginning of a relationship, where a customer is just trying to figure out what it is that you're offering, to the end, which is they're ready to move forward and say, yes, let's move forward. From really being in sales myself and selling millions of dollars worth of services and technology to companies like Apple and Texas Instruments, complex selling environments, I've observed that there's basically only 12. I haven't come across more than that. And I've also found that they fall into three buckets, three different sections of the process of selling.
Okay.
There's the process where you're talking about problem, which is the first bucket. Second bucket, you're talking about solutions of what you're offering and the possibilities. And the third is really how you can move forward, how this is all going to work and who needs to be involved, the logistics. So if you really look at any sale, anytime, anywhere, right now, as we speak, you can really listen to those conversations and really understand where they're at in that whole process of selling and buying and that process of change. So I mention this because we're talking about sales decks now and sales presentations. And in the past, people looked at sales presentations as information transfer, like looking at books, like white background, page numbers in the lower right-hand corner, bullet points, because it was the idea in the 2000s and earlier, and even the 2010s, was that we're here because I need to push information in your faces. But the 2020s, and we know that information is now like you can find anything you want. It's not about information share. The presentation in a complex sale really has to be about building the relationship and having these very powerful conversations, all 12 of them, at some point during that relationship.
Yeah.
Is there some sort of percentage, like most of the conversations are on the problem bucket versus, the solution? Is it evenly spread?
No, because, for example, I don't see it percentage-wise because it depends on what conversations maybe even preceded your presentation.
Right.
So, for example, if you got a referral and someone who really trusts you and said you should go meet with somebody and you meet with them, they don't need to see your slides with a gazillion logos and learn about how many customers you have. So the whole trust conversation and the social proof conversation does not even need to be in the presentation, right? So the idea is that these 12 conversations, each of them are essentially slides that you decide as a seller going into a presentation, what conversations do we need to be having?
So how do you know where you're at? Because maybe it's more of a conversation, like you said, where you don't just come in with a static deck for every single client meeting. Instead, you may have to modify for the one who's a referral and they're pretty much ready to move forward, to another who's at the very beginning stage. So do you have any advice for someone who's not entirely sure where they are at in this conversation?
Yeah. So I still break it down into three buckets, three sections: problem, first bucket; second, solution; third is how. And within that, decide at any point in the sales process, what do we need to be talking about? So in the problem section, let's say it's a situation where you've already met with 4 people, you've gotten a lot of information about their current challenges. Maybe the problem conversations, you're feeding back what your understanding is of the problem, the impact of that problem, and what happens a year from now if this problem is not solved. And then you get buy-in. Do you believe that this is true? Are you in agreement with this? Are we on the same page about your current state situation and your problem. And that whole section, you can totally do that at that stage of the buying cycle where you've already gotten some information. You can also do that if you don't have any information. You can start out and say, well, you know what? In the first section here, even though I know nothing about you, I know nothing about your organization, I can tell you that organizations your size and shape, or they're dealing with the things that you're dealing with, have the following 5 problems. So why don't we talk about these? Are any of these your problems? So that's a way to use, as it were, a template of the problem conversations inside the early part of your sales deck.
Yeah, I love that. So it's going to be about asking questions to figure out exactly where you and your client are at, or let's say you and your prospect are at that stage.
Well, yeah. So let's talk about you and your prospect. So what's your role and what's their role in this journey that you're going through, right? I love stories. And we talked about the power of a story. And your role needs to be not the Superman and hero where you're coming in with some awesome thing that's going to save the day. And if you do that, I can promise you're not going to win friends and influence people in a sale. And too many salespeople do that. Too many salespeople think that what they're offering is like, that's the jam. But in reality, your customer is the hero of the story, not you. And you are there to serve not as the court jester or the happy sidekick, but you're there to serve as the trusted guide, the Obi-Wan or the Mary Poppins or the Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid, right? You're there to not be a cheerleader, not to sort of make them feel awesome, but to really talk about some of their challenges because you know about them. If you're there to solve a problem like your business is, and you know a lot about those problems, you're probably going to be able to describe their problems better than they can even describe it themselves. And in doing so, you're showing more credibility for your company and yourself than your fancy slide with all the logos on it.
So, Greg, I remember we talked about this probably months ago. You had mentioned just that, like if you can identify your customers' problems better than they can, then you're probably most certainly going to be the one that they believe understands the solution best. And that stuck with me. You know, I've shared it with Jeremy and I've just kept it in mind. So for anyone listening, I just hope that soundbite gets stuck in to our sales process, but also just how we approach meetings here, because I think understanding and showing the prospect that we understand what they're going through might be the most crucial step in a pitch. Is that right?
Yes. So most salespeople, most marketing directors and VPs that create slide decks for their sales teams, slide number 2, slide number 3, the beginning part of the presentations are all wrong. They're typically about who we are, why we do what we do. And by the way, nobody cares. Even I've seen slides.
So true.
Tons of bad slides like where our offices are based. Like, oh my God, are you going to waste someone's freaking time showing you a slide with where your offices are based? So it's almost like people are trapped in a world that doesn't exist anymore. That's what a website is for. You know, people learn more about your company and what you do in the elevator going to the meeting with you than in your slide presentation, because your slide presentation is so bad. We all know it. We've all seen it. So,
well, keep in mind, Greg, that people come to you to fix their slide deck. So not to show you how great their slide deck is. So there may be a bit of a bias towards receiving a lot of bad slide decks.
Well, that's true. I suppose that's true. But I guess what I'm talking about are slide decks where slide 1 and slide 2 are speaking about the promised land, speaking about the place that you're going to help get people to and to inspire them to change from the way they're doing things today.
Okay, so tactical approach. I'm starting my pitch deck from scratch. How should I actually go about building it?
Yeah, my advice is to take a piece of paper out. First of all, delete your last presentation. Just delete. And just kidding. And
I'm good to go.
All right. So take out a piece of paper and draw 3 circles. 1, 2, and 3.
All right.
And in circle number 1, title it the problem. Okay. Circle number 2, it is solution. And circle number 3 is how. And then just take some time to, in those circles, draw subcircles, what conversations you really like to be having. And it's okay to have a slide, for example, that has an open question on it, like, what's most important to you? right? And that speaks to the goals that someone's has. So goals is a conversation to have in the first section, the problem section, because it's a goal because they don't have it. And they don't have it because it's a problem. So it belongs there. So what's most important to you is a discussion there. A discussion could be about this is what we've heard, could be a title of a slide. This is what we've heard, which is a slide in the problem section, which is about knowing about the problem that organizations like the ones that you're in are dealing with. This is what we've heard. Are we on the same page here? Are you dealing with these things too? So it's an alignment discussion. And you can also say, you know what, we're dealing with those 9 things, but there's one thing that you don't know we're dealing with. And then boom, it opens up to either more alignment or maybe it's not the right customer because of that issue.
Love it.
I'm just touching a couple nodes in that first bucket, but you can do the same process when you get to, say, solution. You're going to want to not just show like how it works, but you're going to want to have like evidence-based discussions where on the left side you have a before and the right side you have after. People love before and after, visual side by side. So if you're talking about transforming how and helping people and helping businesses do things better, well, you have to show that visually in the second section. So how, people may say, wow, you guys really understand our problem, right? Wow, you guys have this awesome solution. Is that really amazing? You can go you can get us lower cost, faster, and higher quality or whatever the vectors are. But then you're at the last section, which is like, okay, well, how? How is this all going to work? And if you show a slide with 19 steps that goes from New York to Tokyo in terms of process, then people are going to be like, it sounds good, but it looks too involved. It's too complicated. And we got to get back to you on this. All right. So you need to make it really simple in that last section. Like, what are the 3 or 4 steps that it's going to take you to move from where you are today using this old system or this old way of working to this new way that's going to allow you to have the outcomes that we just talked about?
That's really helpful. I'm just trying to understand if the purpose of each slide, Greg, is to do nothing other than facilitate a dialogue.
Correct.
That's it.
Correct.
And it's a dialogue. It's not client team shuts up, presenter just talks, right? It's probably the other way around. If we're doing a very good job, we want the prospect to be speaking, no?
So yeah, there's actually software that listens to conversations, and Gong.io and Chorus are both competitors in this market, providing sales leadership and sales teams with insight into actually what are they talking about. And they did analysis on the talk to listen ratio. And, the winning deals, the deals where salespeople are actually winning after they looked at tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of sales demos and sales calls, the talk to listen ratio is about pretty much 50-50. So, it is really a dialogue.
Okay, 50-50.
Nice.
So both parties can contribute, can and should. But if you find yourself presenting, doing most of the talking, you need to understand there's a red flag there.
Well, the data shows the AI tribe speaks and says the reps that speak more sell less. But the saying speaking, there's questions like, what questions are you asking?
Yeah.
You ask the wrong questions, you get the wrong answers, and you won't get the right deals. So questions are really key. We live in a world where answers are cheap, right? Answers are a dime a gazillion. Just go to Google and you get any freaking answer you want.
Yeah.
And we all know this. We live in a world where answers are cheap. So what's expensive? Knowing what question to ask and asking that question at the right time with the right person.
Do you have any favorite questions that you encourage sales presentations to ask?
Yes. There's probably 3 in the 12 conversations. There's 3 really key questions. One question I mentioned before, which is, what are you trying to accomplish?
That's great.
Because it implies that they haven't accomplished that and they're also trying, which means they're not there. So that's a really powerful question to ask. Another great question to ask is once you've shown them what's possible and shown them wow, that was a really cool demo. Whoa, awesome. Once you've shown that, a really powerful question to ask once you've shown that is, what outcomes would this enable for you? And the reason why I love that question is because as a sales rep, you could never know the answer to that question. It's essentially asking questions that you don't know the answers to are the most powerful questions to ask in sales, because it actually creates a possibility for a change and a growth that your customer could take that you can never imagine. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm just wondering here. I've had a couple of sales coaches in the past. Some of them recommend having a notepad with you and just, hey, do you mind if I take some notes throughout this call presentation? Are you a fan of writing while your client is speaking? Or do you try and just log this away? Or do you like to have keywords you can come back to and mention when you close the pitch or when throughout the call?
So here's the thing. If you're face to face with someone, it's kind of awkward to say, can I record this conversation with your phone? And I've done that sometimes because I like to capture everything. But there's the physical act of writing some words that someone just said on the board as they said it, what honors their words and honors their perspectives in a way that just recording does not. I think I feel honored if someone asked me a question and they actually took the time and wrote it down. I feel honored when they do that. So I want to respect that that's socially what happens when you do that with an audience.
Oh man, whenever I go into demos, I keep on scribbling like page and page and page of things. I'm like way beyond redemption on this.
Well, you can record demos, so you don't have to take notes. But sometimes the act of taking notes helps you remember stuff.
Oh, question about this actually. How do I actually present that? Do we actually jump on a Zoom call, for example, and then I load up PowerPoint presentation, or is there a best format to do it, or any recommendation there?
There's PowerPoint, there's Google Slides, there's Prezi. I don't really have a preference. Most companies like PowerPoint and Google Slides. It's easy for people to change and edit. And I also think that there's a perspective shift that if you're presenting in a sales presentation situation, I recommend go into slide sorter view, which is you can see all the slides and you talk about your presentation as a tool for you to have the conversation. So you're like so meta transparent with your customer. Instead of trying to put on a performance or put on a pitch or a freaking TED talk that's going to blow them away that really no one cares about, no one's going to take action on anyway, why not actually have a real person-to-person, like meaningful connection? You say, well, here is my presentation, all right? I'm not going to present it to you. I'm going to show it to you, and we're going to have a conversation about each of these things as a way for us to really dive into the problems that you're dealing with today and how we might be able to help you. People love that. They're like, how refreshing is that someone is not performing?
So true. Oh man, so true. I'm guilty of that as well.
So let me hear that stated maybe a slightly different way. The mindset that we should have when we approach this is not, hey, let's put on our showmanship and be an actor like Heath Ledger or something. Instead, we are going to just have a conversation, right? Helpful, this kind of thing?
Yes, that's exactly right. Have a conversation, and the realness, the authenticity that you have means that you can be who you are, and that's where your power is as the trusted advisor, the guide, not the charlatan, not the person who comes in with the fancy pants software that's trying to knock everyone's socks off, but just a person who loves what they do because they're helping people. Maybe I suggest you should do some introspection if you're a seller. Why do I do what I do? Is it because I want to make money? Or is it because I really like helping people? If you poll people on that, I have. Most salespeople, like everyone I've ever met, say I like to help people. Like that's why I'm in sales.
The good ones.
The good ones, right.
Yeah, the good ones, for sure.
Right. And so get grounded in that, and then you can be who you want to be who you are.
So am I right to approach the conversation by saying, hey, Greg, well, thanks for jumping on a presentation with me. I put together those 12 slides that I think are very relevant to your situation. And then effectively talking about the presentation that way.
Yeah, you can actually show all 12 on the screen.
Yeah.
Say, you know what, given that we've had conversations before, I just want to spend time talking on slide 4 and slide 7 in this time, which is about, and so you kind of set the agenda for why you're there. You're not there to manipulate or persuade, but you are there to help and to influence.
It sets the tone. I think that's, maybe the greatest way you can kick off a sales call. That's a great tip, Greg. Thanks for that.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very actionable.
I mean, we're talking more about the subtle sort of underpinnings of sales presentations. But most of the time we start by talking about, well, here, take a look at the sales deck that our sales team is using. It's got 43 slides and help us make it better. But that's where it starts. And then it moves to a place, well, what's the story? How are you framing these conversations? And what's the journey that you need to take your customers on from where they are now, typically, to where they need to be successful?
Problem, solution, how.
Yep.
Yeah. So copywriters listening, it sounds similar to the problem, agitate, solve formula. That works quite well. It's kind of just explain where they're at, why that's not a good thing. And then only once you've covered that in great detail, then you can transition to the solution or the how.
Greg is also saying that the second one is actually should come from the customer himself. So the agitate, like why this isn't a good thing, should come from the customer themselves, right?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So the agitate. There's a great book. I don't have it behind me, but have you heard of that Chris Voss book?
Yeah, Never Split.
Never Split, the difference?
Yep.
So there's a whole chapter dedicated to getting people to no instead of getting people to yes. I think in the 2010s, it was about getting customers to yes, but we know that nobody likes to be manipulated. So it's wonderful to start actually a sales conversation or to talk about maybe in the solution section, as you segue to how, to ask a question like, okay, so we talked about what you guys are doing today, and we talked about this solution that might be able to help you. So here's my question. If you guys were in the exact same situation as you are now, next year, this time, would you be good with that? Would you be okay with that? And if your person says at that point in the presentation, yeah, we'd be okay with it,
Run.
You actually want to get a no from that question. No, we'd not be okay with that, which is the platform to help anyone change.
Oh, really? So why not? Right? Is that the follow-up?
What do you mean?
Well, if they say no, Greg, we would definitely not be excited to stay here next year. Is it a natural follow-up to say, tell me more about that? What would that look like
if you're doing everything manually today, you got people in the basement counting sheep or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
And you say, would you be okay next year, this time, where nothing has changed, where you still got people in the basement counting whatever, and they say, no, they would not be okay with that, then that opens up the door right there with, okay, so what you've seen, we've shown you about what's possible. What do you need to see? It really lets them drive, but you are very much the Sherpa in this. You are asking the right question to influence where they're going and how they're thinking about the problem.
So, okay, I've asked this question before. It's kind of like rubbing salt in the wound. It's an agitating question because sometimes I wonder if I'm crossing the line here by digging into a clear pain point. Jack, we don't have enough leads. It's, damn right it's a problem. I'm going to lose half my guys. And so I ask it, but I feel that, this is going to sting. I don't know if I should go there. Have you ever gotten negative feedback from exploring this deeper? Or in your experience, is it pretty much a safe question to ask in all cases?
No, well, that's the art of all this. So
that's the art.
You can tell the truth and it hurts, or you can tell the truth in a tactful way that almost has a sweetness to it and a charm. So I think that's the art that we all have to find in our relationships with people we love and our customers the same way.
Maybe it's because I come from a development background, but man, I'm terrible at that. I keep on saying the straight truth or the thing I believe, straight in the face of people. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Engineers aren't allowed to be crafty.
That's right.
You just have to be the thorn in our sides, I think.
It's binary, either it works or it doesn't, come on.
Any help for developers out there, Greg?
Thanks. Beyond redemption, right?
Hire a sales team.
Developers are people too. And I want to also say that, people put people in boxes like, oh, developers think this way and salespeople think this way.
That's right.
All people have intuition. Every human has intuition. And that's sort of the insight that we have about situations and people that go beyond what our physical senses, our sight and our ears are telling us. And I believe we all have that, regardless of.
I agree. But here's what is interesting, actually. whenever I have like conversation with a customer, I have zero problem to tell them, actually, from what I learned, you probably will be better off with another software that is not our software. And, happy to give you the link and help them and stuff like that. And I think this sort of like honesty really, really helps to also, build trust and build strong relationship. And we do have sometimes some very difficult conversation, but I'm always upfront, and I think people appreciate that. And the flip side of that is, yes, I probably leave a lot of money on the table, but at the same time,
you don't leave money on the table.
I agree.
Long-term relationship is built that way.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not screwing it up totally. Okay. Good to know.
Maybe that quarter, you're not closing as much as someone else, but if you look at the lifetime value of that customer relationship, I believe that will return more, that approach.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's an asset that more of us should be, let's say, obsessing about. Just pure honesty and playing the long game.
I used to sell with a solution architect. His name was Mahasi, and he wasn't from Tokyo, but he was from Malaysia. And he had like the personality of vinegar. Like he was such a sourpuss.
Oh,
but I loved bringing him on sales calls because he would stick the knife in and turn it all the time. He wouldn't care. And I got to play at least like the nice guy in that role. But over time, I have adopted a little bit of what Maha was in me. Like I've found a way to tell the truth and to talk about things that, you're there to help people at the end of the day, and so sometimes it's okay to be, challenger sale is all about that, right? To be the challenger. But if you don't have the right rapport with the person, you'll be shown the door, pretty quickly. So
here's something. I'm actually not that good at building rapport when I have an entire team on a Zoom call. I'm usually talking via email with one of them, and we're cool. They know me from, let's say, the podcast or from a guest post or something. But then I'm just wondering if you've seen someone or maybe yourself have the ability to establish rapport with a room.
A digital room?
Yeah. I mean, am I dreaming, or is that like any tips for breaking the ice when they bring in the CEO who's saying, yeah, who's this guy? What's he about?
I feel that digital rooms, unlike real rooms where people can feel your presence in the room, and it's almost like you can relax and be quiet. And that has sometimes so much more power than being like the, hey, what's going on? And full of energy. And so I feel like digital rooms, in my experience, you do have to produce a lot more vocal and visual energy in order to get the message across.
Or to make people, let's say, new people who have never interacted with your brand before to become comfortable, maybe?
Yeah, I think the jury's out, but I think generally speaking, like if you're on a podcast, you don't have visual cues. So the only tool you have is voice. So if you're in digital, only tool you have is vocal and visual. But when you're in a room, you can just be standing still and like, wow, right? So that's the point I want to make, that we just acknowledge those differences, and then intuitively you should probably adapt.
I appreciate that. And just one last note on this digital selling space, since we're talking about it, it probably does matter what your background looks like, what your audio quality sounds like. Does it look like you're in the 50th floor Manhattan building, or you're still working out of the basement over here? I imagine you probably would recommend those selling to teams via Zoom, let's say, to invest in lighting and audio, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that matters for sure.
Or does that actually matter? I mean, for me, it matters. I always ask people coming on my Zoom call hey, do you have a webcam so I can see your pretty face? But sometimes, they don't have. And it's just like voice. And for me, it's always like very awkward. Is that a problem usually, not having the video turned on?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I think that has to do more with social courtesies. And, I was doing a presentation to an investment company that was looking to get their website and their presentation revamped. And I was basically talking to them about the process and taking them through what we do with them. So it was essentially a presentation. And I can tell that everyone had their video cameras turned off. I can tell no one was comfortable showing their faces. They wanted to all be in listening mode and not be judged by how they look.
Yeah.
But I decided to keep my camera on so they can stay focused on me. And I shared my screen and I, left nothing out on the stage. I basically poured it all out there. And when I stopped and I said, so can I ask you here, let's go around the room, virtual room, and let me get your thoughts on what you've just seen. Everyone exploded at once.
Really?
Which was surprising because what that told me, since everyone exploded at once to talk, was I had everyone there connected with me.
Yeah.
And that was the only moment of feedback that I knew I had that. Up until that time, for all I know, I could have been offline.
Right.
Oh yeah, it's terrible those times.
You're speaking like to something that's, hitting something, because I can think of, I think it was the last 2 calls I had. There was 3 people on the call and one of them was silent the whole time, usually because they were from a department that was a little bit outside the project. Maybe their hierarchy was slightly lower where they were uncomfortable jumping in, but it was like 10 seconds. Hey, Jack, I want to introduce you to John. He's heading up XYZ. He's sitting on the call. Hey, John, what's up? And then John is silent. I don't know if he died. And I feel like I could have used exactly what you just said just to check back in at the end.
Right. And I look forward to the 2020s when we have better tools, because I think the tools we have are really primitive. I don't know. I feel like I've been to the future. But anyway, like the idea of getting people's thoughts in polls and getting people's sentiments real time that don't take audio space, but visual space. I envision future of Zoom to have a way to take people's thinking and thoughts and feelings and energy. So it's almost like live, you can see things happening. And I know that when I present in rooms with lots of people, I like to use tools like Slido, where I say, okay, everybody take out your phones. I'm going to ask you a question. What do you see as the biggest barrier to business in this year for your company? And there's a multiple choice. And then you can see people vote and it's silent, but then you start having a conversation about the problem and it's all silent and you're the only presenter, but it's a poll-based conversation and everyone is engaged with that. So I think I look forward to the day where more of that is used here in digital.
So Greg, why don't we wrap up with a little bit of a rapid fire episode? You're in the hot seat and Jeremy and I are just going to bombard you with some questions here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's kick it off with a cold email themed question here. At what point of the reply, we're sending cold emails, the prospect gets back to us. At what point do we invite them to a presentation? Is it during the first 10-minute call? After that, right away? What do you think?
Nobody wants a presentation ever.
That's your value proposition, Jack, right there?
No, presentation is the last thing that somebody wants. People want to solve their problems, and how could you help me solve that problem? And yeah, pretty much presentation is only maybe something that you may need to do or have to do, want to do to have, I would say, turn that presentation into a conversation. Like presentation is almost like an evil word.
Okay.
Sorry to digress, but it's a trigger word. People get triggered. Nobody wants a presentation.
So push it back only when it's time to make a decision.
In the early stages of the discussion, they're trying to understand, what do you sell? How could you help me? And you got to get that basic stuff out there. And if they say, okay, let's schedule a time so we can understand more about what you do. And great, I'll come to that call. And who else do you want to invite? Bob and Susan and whoever.
Cool.
Let's get a party together. Who's bringing the chips? And I'm going to bring some slides to help us facilitate the discussion of how we're going to help you get from where you are today to where you want to go.
Well said. Okay.
Big love here.
Rapid fire style. Let's move on to the next one. Single most common mistake you see sales presentations make?
They go into robot mode because they've done so many of these and they don't even they're not even human.
Okay. So remember, it's a dialogue. Cool. Next, what's the hardest thing to teach people when they come to you to say, Greg, help me give better demos?
To make it be about a problem-centric and question-centric. versus solution centric and answer centric.
Just because we want to keep coming back to, no, but our product is so great. That's the story.
Let me show you the 92 things that our thing does. Wait till you see them. Let me take you through all of them. That's solution centric. Problem centric is more like, before I show you the 92 things, in fact, I only want to show you 3 things. And those 3 things will be determined by what 3 things will have the biggest outcomes, the biggest impact for you to really move the needle for your business.
And I think this next question is going to piggyback on just that. How do we personalize the pitch for that client?
So I'm about personalization on the fly because I hate spending time before a meeting doing a lot of PowerPoint work. That's myself. And I think I speak for 99.9% of salespeople out there.
Yep.
So the idea is you need to be armed with a sales deck that really allows you to look at these slides as conversational cards. So you get to choose which card you want to play in the game, at what point in the game you want to play it.
I love it here.
Conversational cards.
So tactical advice here, build a slide deck that contains a lot of the commonality things. And then just like you mentioned, say to the customer, hey, we're going to focus on slide number 4, or just pick it at runtime.
Nice.
Love it.
That makes a lot of sense. Jeremy, this next question's probably up your alley. What's the best pitch in the SaaS community right now? Or is there a special pitch for software folks?
SaaS, software as a service, I look at it pretty futuristic, that everything's a service and software is a service. So if you're selling a service is a service. Why are you selling it? Well, to help someone fix a problem. Again, stay problem-centric in your SaaS pitch.
Problem, solution, how?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's say we're at a point when we're not giving these sales presentations anymore. Can, and if so, how do we onboard a new team member to take over for us?
Yeah. So first of all, you should have a lot of recordings of great demos, and definitely have a new person watch some of these recordings and like ask them basically to report on, after watching 5 recordings, I want you to report on what second, like 23 seconds and 22, like what part of the video did you actually hear the aha moment? Where was the aha moment in the demo? From the customer's point of view, not from the presenter's point of view. All right? So,
cha-ching, man. This is a money question.
Yeah. So that means that the homework assignment, so you report to your boss, say, okay, I watched these 5 videos. Here's the moments where I felt there were the aha moments. And so that's great because that's the learning exercise. So when the salesperson goes out, they know how to do it a little bit better because the aha moments is what they're looking for. And so in addition to that, last piece about onboard, that it really is about the story, that the new salespeople really need to be grounded in what the fundamental narrative is that you're telling. Because it's a story about change. It's a story about transformation, how you're helping a company, change from what they're doing today to what you think they should be doing. But if they don't want to do it, then there's no change. So it's like you need to really help salespeople anchor themselves in that story of change. And so this is something that PitchKitchen does, is really help the CEOs of those companies, the chief storyteller, really refine and clarify what is the narrative, the simple narrative that you want your people to rally around and dominate the market with. 2
more questions from me. Jeremy, you may have others, but in your opinion, what's the grading scale, or maybe what grading scale do you use to decide, hey, this is a good slide, let's keep it, or let's trash it? All
right, a good slide or not. So, okay, white background, kill it, because it's a document. It's information. If it has a page number in the lower right-hand corner, it's a document. It's not a conversation. If there's more than 3 bullet points on the slide, it's speaker's notes. It's not a presentation. If your slides don't look like billboards, they should look like beautiful billboards. They should look like before and after environments. They should be relatively emotional. You should look at it and have an emotional reaction to those slides. So if they're not that, try to make them that and try to make them fit in this conversational guide that you're creating. You can't see this, listeners, but I'm grinning over here just because I feel like, Greg, you're crystallizing a lot of presentation questions all of us are probably asking ourselves in, a couple sentences. So thank you for rocking this rapid fire. Last one for me, text or images. You spoke about it a little bit, but what do we got to really worry about here? Yeah, images should be 100 to 1. We are visual beings. And this is really cool. So right now, like I like to talk with my hands. Some, people like to talk with their hands. And you ever watch someone talk with their hands? What are they doing with their hands? What am I doing with my hands right now? I am illustrating ideas and concepts and before and afters. And so we are visual creatures. And to ignore that and just put words on screens is totally ignoring who we are as people, as communicators, and how we want to get ideas across. So if you're someone who uses your hands to talk, then you should have slides that are very visual that help essentially illustrate what you want to illustrate to get the idea across. And all of us aren't artists, and that's why companies like us exist to help create beautiful slides that help your people have these breakthrough conversations.
Can I piggyback on this one?
Sure.
So what about beautiful text?
Beautiful typography.
Yeah.
Beautiful text. So I love typography. I love it. I'm not sure what you mean. Like you can have a paragraph of text and no matter how beautiful those letters are, it's going to be an eyesore. So I think you can have no more than say 3 words or 5 words to make it beautiful.
Got it.
Is that what you mean by beautiful?
Yeah. I mean, just choosing the right font, for example, and making sure it's very pleasant just to read the text. Like Medium, I know is spending a lot of time just finding the right font so people really enjoy reading.
Right. So imagine picture a slide of a woman who is jumping over a pond in the street, and her gait is like long and like graceful and beautiful. And underneath it is the words, just do it. Right? You can picture immediately where that's from, right? You get it. It's an emotional connection of putting your everything and going for it. And that's like the brand story of Nike. So of course you want your slides to be as beautiful as that. And those words will be beautiful.
Got it. So no white background, just text, right? Ideally, you have an image to support the story and the emotion.
Right. You need to complement. The text will take that image to a whole new realm. It'll be 3-dimensional. It won't just be a woman jumping over a pond. It'll speak to a story of courage.
Got it.
Now that I know how important images are, where can I go to get some very high quality presentation level images?
Yeah, so there are a few sites that we use to get images, and sometimes we have to license them. Many times we do because of the situations. But Unsplash is great, unsplash.com. There's also another site that we use called, Pixabay, Pixabay. Has some good images.
Thanks.
What about vector images then?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is my opinion that vector images are like of people. I don't know. It's very much used. It's like it feels like user interface software. There's a certain subculture of companies that use that. And if you want to look like those companies, you'll use that too.
So I guess last question from me is, do you have an example of a really good pitch deck that we could look at that is maybe public?
Yeah, so actually I'd like to take you to, it's not all of the presentations we work on are confidential because of the nature of their sales process and their customers. No one's going to share their presentation deck. But let me take you to a website called bainsights.com, BA Insight, no S at the end, bainsight.com. And on that page, you can essentially see what the sales presentation looks like because from the top down, it takes you through the whole story of what they're offering, what the problem is. Do you suffer from these problems? These are the typical challenges. This is how the software works. And then the call to action is speak to a data expert, but there'll be a different call to action in the sales presentation. So I just want to take you to that website. It's what we designed, and it really echoes a lot of the sales presentation. You can also go to pitchkitchen.com where we have some sanitized before and afters of sales slides. And you'll see the befores look nothing like the afters. Even the content's different because the whole conversation is looked at instead of just information transfer.
So, Greg, if one of our cold emailers or if a lot of our cold emailers liked your thoughts on creating some really great presentations, where's the first place that you would send them to learn more about exactly what Pitch Kitchen does? Is there a sign-up page? Is there links you want to share?
Go to pitchkitchen.com. You can subscribe to that list. We sometimes send out blogs that we do on LinkedIn. I'm pretty prolific on LinkedIn. I like to share some tips and tricks and suggestions. I also run a show called Sales Therapy Live on LinkedIn. It's a weekly show, and we talk about what some of these issues about what really makes salespeople thrive and have great relationships with their customers.
Okay, Greg, just before we end, do you have any book recommendation for, sales in particular?
Yes, absolutely. So first book, Counterintuitive Approach to Living a Good Life. That's on a personal level. And I'd also like to recommend that book by Christopher Voss, Never Split the Difference, How to Negotiate Like Your Life Depended on It. Wonderful book. And also Story Brand by Donald Miller really helps salespeople look at the sales conversation in the context of what your role is in the story.
All right, Greg, you've enlightened us on the sales pitch, hopefully made the world a little bit better, and people will dread the presentations much less because of your insights. So really huge thanks from us and all the cold emailers listening.
Sure. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Greg. That was awesome.
Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher, or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast
so they can send awesome emails
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.